The Life Dash is the precious time between when you arrive and when you depart from this world, and what you do during this time matters. Your dash was meant to be lived big. It is time to release the self-saboteur that has been renting space within you for far too long. It is time to discover, rediscover, and explore your dynamic and delicious selves. Your life is meant to thrive. So dare to be audacious. This is your time to say yes, I choose me. Are you ready to consciously create the life you deserve?
Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
Welcome to the Life Dash with Michele Mattia. Dare to be audacious. I am Michele Mattia, and I am ridiculously thrilled about today's show. We have a very special guest, Jay Bakker, and I have a bio for Jay Bakker, which I will share a little bit in a little bit, but I had the pleasure of reading his newest book that came out earlier this year, Faith, Doubt, and Other Lines I've Crossed, Walking with the Unknown God. And I could not put it down. And I've always been an avid reader, and prior to becoming a mom, there were often times where I would read books, and they were so good that I could not put them down, and they were page turners. But since becoming a mom, it often takes months to get through a book. And I will tell you that from the moment I read the introduction to this book, which was also written with Andy Meisenheimer, it was a page turner. I felt at times that they were speaking directly to me, that somehow before they wrote this book, they had gotten inside my head, and all of the doubts that I had ever experienced or thought with regards to how I was raised, with the religion I was raised in, with my own journey to find the spirituality that works for me, as well as just living life and knowing that we were all put on this planet to thrive, that we were put on this planet to support and love one another, and how uncomfortable at times that can feel. It is in this book, and if you have yet to read it, by the time this interview is done, you will be going to your nearest bookstore or ordering it online or downloading it to your iPad, iPhone, Kindle, Nook, what have you. What I loved about the title, and the title really grabbed me, was Other Lines I've Crossed. And when we think about that, crossing lines, usually we hold that in a negative context. But think about this for a moment. What if crossing the line resulted in awareness? What if crossing the line resulted in growth, a shift in consciousness that released lack and limiting words from our vocabulary and thoughts that we've been holding in mind? What if crossing the line paved the way for us to be open, willing, and receptive to good showing up in our lives, and understanding that we were all meant to live lives that astonish? Wouldn't that be extraordinary? And we're going to learn more about that in just a few moments with Jay Bakker. And if you would like to participate in the show, please call the studio line. The number is 714-333-3349. You can also email any questions. The address is connect@michelemattia.com, or you can post to my Life Design Facebook page, which is facebook.com/designyoursuccess. But before we move further, it's time to get centered. So I want everyone to take a deep breath and relax your body. I want you to inhale love, and I want you to exhale fear. I want you to inhale peace of mind and release self-criticism. I want you to inhale clarity and release self-doubt. And as you release any clutter and clatter from your mind and just focus on being in this moment. Allow the affirmation for today's show to empower you. What others have to say about me is none of my business. My life is meant to astonish. This is your time. Dare to be audacious.
The Life Dash with Michele Mattia. Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
I've performed over 3,000 cosmetic surgery procedures in just the past few years on celebrities, athletes, and patients in South Florida, Beverly Hills, and Manhattan.
Ever wonder why celebrities have skin that seems to glow and radiate health? Get the treatments the stars receive only at Forever Young Med Spa. This year, lose the fat, keep the curves. Forever Young Med Spa. Relax, rejuvenate, and transform. Winner of the Best Cosmetic Surgical Center 3 years in a row.
Hi, I'm Brian Sodella, owner of Forever Young Med Spa, and I personally invite you to visit our location in Cooper City at 8723 Sterling Road at the intersection of Pine Island and Sterling. Our phone number is 954-450-2626.
Hey, it's Niecy Nash, taking a break from my new TV Land sitcom, The Soul Man, to talk to all you moms out there. My character Lolly is a mom too, and she's pretty fierce when it comes to protecting her family. But all moms need to remember to take care of themselves too, especially when it comes to heart disease. It's the #1 killer of women, but you can reduce your risk through healthy diet and exercise. So spread the word and take care of yourself. Find out more at GoRedForWomen.org.
Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
What others have to say about me is none of my business. My life is meant to astonish. Welcome back to the Life Dash with Michele Mattia, and I'm thrilled to have as a guest today Jay Bakker. Jay Bakker is co-pastor of Revolution NYC. He is a gay rights activist and winner of the 2012 PFLAG Straight for Equality in Faith Communities Award. He is a grace enthusiast. I absolutely love that title. A dyslexic, introverted, pessimist, and a prisoner of hope. Baker's previous books include Son of a Preacher Man and Fall to Grace, A Revolution of God, Self, and Society. Now, according to his bio, he lives in Brooklyn, New York, but I do know that he and his family have recently journeyed to Minnesota, and I know that he's going to share more with that and us. And again, if you would like to participate, the studio number is 714-333-3349. But without further ado, welcome to the show, Jay. How are you?
Great, thank you.
I have to say, I shared at the beginning of the show that when I was reading your book, it was so awesome. I'm like, how did he get in my head? How did he know what I needed to hear and to read? This book is absolutely extraordinary, and I want to start by reading a quote that comes right at the very beginning, and it's what drew me in the most. And I'd love to hear about how you felt in writing this. I'm
Sure.
I'm just a person walking with God, a person who has experienced loss and pain and doubt. I'm just a pastor in New York City trying to find his way, fight for the marginalized, and welcome to the outcast. Scandal will follow me forever, and scandal has made me famous. But my goal is to make grace famous, because grace is nothing if not scandalous. That is so powerful. Why this book and why now?
Thank you. Well, it just, it's funny because the book I had written before this was kind of all about grace, and I had a different idea for the book would follow that, and I was just going through a lot of doubts, and I had a lot of more questions, and it just seemed like the book just kind of, led in that direction. I mean, originally it was just going to be, each chapter was going to be on a different subject. But when me and Andy started working together, it just kept coming together. And my good friend Pete Rollins, who I've been hanging out a lot with at the time, we just started chatting about the idea of grace, but how doubt plays into that, and how everyone is, we all go through moments of doubt, and we've all grown up with moments where we were told that we weren't supposed to doubt and we weren't supposed to struggle with those type of things. And just it happened out of conversation. I'm dyslexic, so that's why I work with a writer. And the interesting thing about working with a writer is that you're able to take your ideas and throw them off somebody, and you end up getting something that you never even thought you would get because you've got a partner to work with.
I think, first of all, as I shared, I did not put this book down, much to my toddler's frustration, but Daddy took over for me. One of the reasons that this book I feel is so important is you are so authentic in this. And right off the bat, as you just shared, you started talking about doubt, the doubt that you were feeling, you're experiencing, and to be that authentic, to put that out there, especially when you are yourself a pastor and you have congregants that look to you, that and very often, as you know, pastors are held to a much higher degree. And I find it extraordinary. But you did one thing. But you also did one thing more with regards to these chapters, because the first chapter in this book, it's like you are smacking the reader right in the face, because you start talking about God, and you ask us to consider such things like it's a God thing, a God moment, and what does it say about God, that God can arrange moments but fails to prevent catastrophe? And I think that is one of the biggest challenges we feel in today's society, when we feel challenged by this God, and how can things happen if there is indeed a God?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's always about being authentic and honest. And, I would have moments where I would meet people and get to know them and be like, oh, this is such a God thing. But then, I can also, remember my mom dying, and I remember my mom saying, I just don't understand why God's not doing anything. And that was a really harsh moment, and it really caused me to rethink these ideas. I don't think God gives us parking spots. I'm at the point in my life where I don't think God is some man sitting in the sky. What is God is I hope it's the ground of all being, but I don't know. And so I do have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. But I think we've gotten we've created God into almost like this genie or a butler for, miracles, that we've given God a personality and a thought and an idea rather than looking to Christ. We've created something else altogether. And we forget things like we're, blessed are the poor spirit, and blessed are the suffering, and we miss those type of things. So I think it's just trying to get back to the reality of what God is and what God isn't, and realizing that we don't really know very much. And that
it's okay. And that's one of the things that I took out of that, is that it's okay. It's okay to not know. And for those of us who are control freaks out there, that can feel very difficult to swallow, because we spend so much energy on wanting to understand. I mean, it's in the news right now where, with Trayvon Martin's, the trial and his family, and many of us who are watching how that family is just handling things. And we mention, and it's been mentioned, words of grace and dignity, and they are just handling this in such a way that many people are asking them, how can you have your faith in being in this moment of tragedy?
Yeah, and when you hear words like grace, and I think grace is the realization of accepting the unacceptable, and realizing that God has given us a gift to accept the unacceptable, not just ourselves, but in situations. And I think that's where the idea of God becomes really powerful. The idea of Christ becomes really powerful, as that, Jesus didn't come in suffering. I've read people write, well, the reason I don't believe in God is because the Bible doesn't say anything about suffering. But the Bible just talks about suffering over and over again, and how we get through suffering, and how we're supposed to bear one another's burdens, and even we love those who give suffering to us. So we have a lot of information, we have a lot of advice to follow, and I think it's in those moments where you see people who've lost something and they realize they don't have the power anymore, they don't have control anymore. All they have is their hands are open and they don't have anything. And that's in a moment where I think you touch grace. You find grace in that moment. You can also find despair. You can also find fear. But I think that, I think grace is something that I have a hard time putting words to. I mean, I wrote Fall to Grace was a book of me trying to explain what grace is. And I tried to write a whole book about it. I still don't think I've even grasped it yet. But I think that the idea is, if we can accept the idea of loss, if we can accept hurt, we can accept even when we're doing things that are unacceptable and realize those are accepted by something greater than ourselves. I think that's when we kind of become in touch with God and we're able to work on ourselves and others.
And you also talk about in this book, which I think threw a lot of people upside down, is doubt is good for your faith. And you actually shared that doubt has caused you to grow in faith. Can you delve into that a little deeper? Because that almost seems the complete opposite. And that's, again, hard because we always, very often we try to understand with our brain instead of listening with our heart.
Well, I kind of had God in I don't even want to say a box. I kind of held God between two pieces of leather, in the Bible, and I had God kind of figured out that way, and God was sitting on a throne somewhere, and heaven below me. I mean, heaven above me and hell below me, and all that literal type of thinking. And when you start to question that stuff and really doubt that stuff, and realize a lot of it was metaphoric speaking, or a lot of it was traditional ways of telling stories or poetry. And when you start to do Greek and Hebrew studies and then historical backgrounds, and you start to realize different laws, and you start to realize, oh my gosh, so much of this is really confusing. I mean, if you really want to be confused, just read a book on the biblical canon and how it was put together. It's mind-boggling, and you go, oh my gosh, it came together like this. And what it causes me to do is realize that, the God that I was doubting God. I didn't believe in God. I was losing my faith. But for some reason, the few things like loving my enemy, doing good to those who persecute me, accepting I'm accepted, these grace ideas in Jesus, there was something there so when I doubted, when I lost everything, I had to allow and realize that I had no grasp on what God was. And I had no grasp of who God was. And all of a sudden, that became bigger. It became so big that I just lived. It literally became the ground of being. It literally became everything above and below my feet, that God was amongst everything. And people say, oh, that sounds so new agey and things like that. It's just saying, I realize that I'm a finite human being trying to connect with the infinite. And I think another way of expressing that is love. Is when we love others, we pass it to one another. And love becomes infinite even though we're finite and we pass away and we die. But something we did, someone we helped, someone we loved is carried on and carries that on. So I have to rest with the idea that I'm finite, that I'm going to leave this world one day, that we're all going to, we get old, we pass away, we have accidents, whatever. But there's something greater, there's something infinite. And that's what I realized through doubt was, that kind of infinite love of Christ. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it really
it does.
It does, my heart.
And it does. And what I appreciate about what you've shared, a lot of you're using the word love, and I use the word love a lot as well. And when I'm doing my show and when I'm speaking, and I think often when people hear someone like you talking about love, I believe that they immediately go to that personal love. And where, if we love someone, that means we have to like them and we have to condone what they're doing. And what you're referring to, and what I often refer to, is that which is divine love, which just exists for nothing more than to love. It doesn't judge. It doesn't do anything, but it just radiates love. It doesn't mean that you want to date the person. It doesn't mean that you want to pay for dinner or go out for coffee. And we're going to talk more later about sitting down to dinner with those that we don't agree with. But I think that we get too wrapped up in that word love and, I can't possibly love that person because I don't agree with that person.
Right. I mean, we don't realize is that in John when it says God is love, I mean, I really believe that God is love. It's not just an attribute that God has. And there's a great love that we don't understand, and it's not a romantic love. It's not, it's not a friendship love. It's I think it's a little bit of all those things, but it's that love that we read about, and I think Paul wraps it up well. Never gives up, never loses faith, is always hopeful, endures through every circumstance. I mean, when, at the end of Corinthians 13, it says the three things will remain, faith, hope, and love, and the greatest of these is love. So even Paul said that love was even greater than even our faith. And to me, that's mind-boggling and kind of beautiful. So there's something to this mystery that I think we have no choice but to allow it to be a mystery and to experience that acceptance and experience that love and hopefully share it with others.
And, when I was getting ready and so excited to have you on the show, I was reading some of the articles that were written where you contributed, and one of them was what it was like to be the son or daughter of pastors, of preachers. And of course, I'm a product of the 80s, so I immediately went to the Kevin Bacon movie and Footloose. And and I'm sure. I mean, we all know the original, not the remake. Nothing against the remake, but the original. And I thought, and I was wondering for you, especially we're talking about doubt, and we're talking about, and you share so openly your spiritual journey. Not only did you have the pressure as a child of being the son of not one, but two preachers, pastors, but your parents were very well known. Everyone, Jim and Tammy Faye Bakker, they were on TV. There was all this exposure. What was that like for you growing up in that and the parameters that you were given as far as what God is and what faith is and what grace is and this journey that you've been on? Because it's clear that you have shifted, that you have really experienced your own beautiful journey.
Yeah, grace wasn't made really clear to me as a young man, but love was. My parents always, showed me that love was the trump card. Love was the main point always, and I got something from that. But at the same time, they had a huge ministry. I had to have security guards, which was bizarre. My dad had this giant center he was building, that had hotels and different church buildings and a water park, and I mean it was surreal. And then I had the typical youth, the youth workers and youth pastors who would tell you the stories of, Noah, but they never told you the whole story, or Jonah and the whale. You never got like the scary bad parts. It was always like these lovely little parts of these stories, and but what I did get a lot of, because I was Assemblies of God, I got a lot of the very stuff like Thief in the Night, like Jesus is going to come back and will you be ready? And I can remember as a kid, coming home and not being able to find anybody and thinking the rapture happened and I got left behind. I mean, it was terrifying. And if I saw a pile of clothes on the floor, I was like, oh. So, growing up with that, but then when I got into 87, when the scandal happened, and then in 89 when my father went to prison, I got to see another part of the church. Preachers were preaching against my parents, skits on Saturday Night Live, The judge gave my father 45 years in prison originally. It was everything was just like this complete exaggerated world of insanity. And one thing I did notice in that, though, and I think this is what I got from my family, and it's kind of driven me to my own walk, is that there was always still a love for others there. I remember my dad would always talk to me about forgiving people, and I would get so angry at him because he'd want to forgive the people who, I felt had hurt him, and I would just get so angry. I would say, Dad, you're a fool because you're just setting yourself up to be hurt again. But it was through lots of conversations like that and a few incidences that, like the time I met with Jerry Falwell, and just because I wanted my dad, he wanted to meet with my dad, and I said, well, I'm going to meet with him first, where I learned kind of like this power of forgiveness and this power of grace. It was nothing that, that word grace, once again, wasn't anything I understood. But I understood there was something with love and something with Jesus. And over time, I searched that out. But for a long time, I thought God hated me because, I couldn't live right. I would drink and party and, I was girl crazy and all this stuff. And I thought, God must hate me. I once told one of the Furmans, I said, if I would have believed in predestination, I would have thought I was destined for hell. And I was, I just thought God hated me and there was nothing I could do until I read the book of Galatians. And a friend of mine turned me on to the book of Galatians, and I realized that so much what I had learned and been taught in religion was, a lot of it was just garbage and stuff that was just picked here and there, and a lot of it was tradition, an American tradition built around conservatism and all this other stuff. It just wasn't actually Christianity. And then when I started studying Greek and Hebrew and started studying biblical history, my mind just got blown because the news became better, and it started to actually appear as though it was truly good news. And that was kind of what brought me around.
And I want to talk more about that, especially with regards to the history of the Bible and the power that is often put behind the Bible. When we return, I have to take a quick break. Remember, if you'd like to participate in the show, if you have any questions for Jay, the studio line is 714-333-3349. What others have to say about me is none of my business. My life is meant to astonish. This is your time. Dare to be audacious.
The Life Stash with Michele Mattia. Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
This is Diane Lane. If you're thinking of exercising to keep more fit, that's great, but be sure to do it right. Give your body a chance to warm up before exercising and to cool down afterwards. Learn the correct way to run, lift, or to do any of the movements in your program. Don't push yourself harder or faster than your body is ready for. Exercising properly can make you more fit, more relaxed, and generally healthier. Carelessness or abuse can do just the opposite. So be careful.
A message from the Will Rogers Institute, wrinstitute.org.
Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
What others have to say about me is none of my business. My life is meant to astonish. And welcome back to the Life Dash with Michele Mattia and my very special guest, gay rights activist, pastor, grace enthusiast, author, speaker. I could go on and on and on, Jay Bakker. Jay, talking about the Bible, because one of the things that you actually mentioned in this book is that doubt allowed you to read the Bible differently and to find in it a God who is not vengeful. Now, personally, I don't claim to be anywhere remotely knowledgeable about the Bible, but I can say that growing up, I was raised Catholic, And the Bible was always used when I was in catechism and things like that, was intimidation and fear. And honestly, that I do believe is what prevented me from ever opening it and looking at it.
Well, I mean, it's often. I mean, it's so often used that way for people. I mean, it's often the church draws bad leadership, and when bad leadership comes into things, a way to become try to become a good leader or a quick leader is we lead by guilt or shame, and making people feel like they need to be a certain way or live up to a certain expectation. And so I think we see a lot of that in the church all over is God's going to get you if you don't do A, B, C, or D. But then I think often when I look back at it, even when I've been in those places, I realize a lot of it was out of my own insecurity of wondering, well, if I'm not a good leader, or if the people who are following me or people who are part of the congregation aren't doing the right thing, how is that going to reflect on me? And then it just becomes about ego. And that's the trap. That's the trap of ministry.
And you also challenge, and this I found very interesting, you challenge that the Bible isn't the place for answers. And I found that very interesting. Well, and again, you go in further because you talk about, and I think I love that. This is what I love: 66 pieces of literature together with a leather cover and really thin paper.
Yeah. You're literally reading other people's mail.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, it's true, and I mean, there's so much. I mean, I talk about like the pastoral epistles, and like, the chances of them being written by Paul the Apostle are very slim, and probably not. And because it seems like Paul all of a sudden changes his mind on a lot of things, and those are tough things to deal with when you've been raised and told that it's inherent and that it's God's word, and basically, God just, used someone's hands to write it all down. It becomes really scary. One of the best ways I heard it explained was it's like a math book. The Bible's like a math book, and it's not important because it's got the odd or even answers in the back. It's important because it teaches you how to work the problems and work out your own problems. And, that's what the Bible's done for me in a lot of ways. It's also given me a lot of peace and hope and acceptance. But I've also learned a lot from 12-step programs. When you're saying it's none of your business what anybody says about you. I always would think of it's no one's business what anyone else thinks of me. What they think is up to them. That's their business, and it's none of my business. And finding peace in that idea, so I found peace in different areas of the world, because this is another thing I think is if you really do believe that God exists, if you really do believe that Jesus is the Son of God, and Jesus somehow encompasses all of God, I mean, this is a fully loaded thing here. You're thinking everything that was created has God's fingerprint on it. So when we go into 12-step programs, or we go into psychiatry, or we go into different things like that, God's there. Also, when you hear Jesus say stuff like, love your enemies, do good to those who persecute you, you also have to put on the lens. So when you see older understandings of God in the Old Testament as people getting, smiting people or crushing heads, or people getting their, babies' heads being crushed against rocks, or women being raped, and, people saying God was there, obviously that is not the same God that Jesus is, and I believe that Jesus came to show us the true example of God, the true nature of God. And I think so often we just think that Jesus came to give us all a bunch of free tickets if we decided to go to heaven, or so we wouldn't have to go to hell or whatever. When I really think the major point was Jesus showing us the nature of God's love and the nature of grace, and how to live that out and deal with that and deal with everyday struggles in life. It's not this great answer book, and it also allows me to always look outside of it. We just built this system where somehow the church has the answers, and we draw a hungry crowd, and we pretend to have these answers, and then people leave disappointed and disillusioned and hurt. And it's because we're not fully honest. We're not fully honest about our doubts. We're not fully honest about our angers, our confusion, or, hey, this certain verse here makes me upset. It makes me angry. I think Paul missed it. That's not something you hear every Sunday. Or I think, I think Jesus was being a little bit mean to this woman here when when she had said even the dogs get the crumbs.
Right.
But those are honest conversations that people should be having. Instead it's like people get into this apologetic mode of, well, we have to defend A, B, C, and D, rather than taking part of the story, being a part of the story, rather than allowing it to be some story that's God only cares about the past and God stopped talking once the Bible was done and we all have to sit back and watch it. We are all part of the story of life. We're all living in it. And I think it's important to remember that. We can't, Paul the Apostle was like, when he would talk about the other apostles or the 12, he would go, I went and saw them, but their reputations and all this stuff meant nothing to me because, God favors no one in particular. And then we get here and we go, well, Paul must have been, favored particularly because God used him in A, B, and C. And we do the same exact thing. We're doing the same opposite thing to Paul that he said don't do to others. We start to put Paul up on a mountain, and we start to question all these people. And when it was clear that these disciples didn't get along all the time, they had questions, they had discussions. And I think when we stop having those discussions, we basically just say the Bible is a history book at best and, or at worst, just some sort of fantasy book.
But what's so interesting is, and I appreciate what you've just shared, because in your book you talk about that you never wanted the Bible to contradict itself, but there it does. But you also say that the Bible keeps getting better and better for you, that you still love reading the Bible, you still love studying the Bible, you still love researching the Bible. And then you also go on, which I thought this was very interesting, is ask, when you're reading the Scripture, ask the following question: is it good news? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Well, does it belittle others? Does it belittle the outcast? Does it is it something that causes others to suffer? Or is it something that allows me to grow in character and care more about other people? Good news is, Paul saying there's neither male nor female, nor Jew nor Gentile, or Jesus talking to the woman at the well saying, here comes a point where it's not going to matter where you worship, or where you are. And here he is talking to this woman at the well, the Samaritan woman, in the middle of the day. He's probably an outcast amongst the outcasts, revealing himself to her. You see this type of thing. Or I think of verses like, no matter who you are, no matter what you've done, all are saved. We're saved by grace, not by works, so no man may boast. These are, to me, the things that are good news. And when I start to see things that say, slaves obey your masters, or, women should be, quiet in church, or shouldn't be married, or should be married, when you start to understand those things in a historical context, you start to see that there's areas that there's an old structure or old Roman structure being rebuilt in some ways. And that's not necessarily good news. And so you either have to mark it up to tradition or things that were added later into the Bible. And it gets confusing. I understand. This is the type of stuff that used to terrify me. So I understand when people say, well, if one thing's wrong, then it's all wrong. But what I'm saying is let's look at it deeper. Let's see what's there. And for me, the things that I find that maybe were added, or the things that are contradictions, and when you start to push some of that aside, you start to get a better good news. You start to get a better message of love and grace and restoration. Now, and if anybody wants to say, well, this is just an easy-peasy gospel, that's not true at all, because loving others is the hardest thing you can do. It's much easier to control and manipulate people through guilt and judgment and tell them how to live 1 hour. You come see me 1 hour a week or 3 hours a week, and I will tell you how to live and tell you what to do, and then if you don't do it right, I'll ask you to leave. That's a much easier way of doing things, rather than getting down on the ground and saying, you know what, I'm scared too. You know what, I'm not sure if there's a God either. You know what, I'm dealing with this myself. stepping off of your pedestal and being transparent. And so I guess by good news is that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for good news that challenges me to love more, and would allow me to make sacrifices to love more. Not this idea of who's in and who's out. This constant, are you good enough or you're not? Because grace seems like people are always looking for those who aren't quite deserving of grace or shouldn't get grace. We're always, grace is vulgar because it's for everyone, and it's for our enemies, and it's for the people we despise. It's for the people who aren't popular or aren't cool or aren't happy or aren't great, And so it's a very vulgar, unfair thing, but it's ultimately good news for all of us.
Well, thank you. And we actually have some callers coming in, so I'm going to check into the first person who I think has a question. Welcome to the Life Dash with Michele Mattia. Who's this? Hello? Maybe not. It's so funny. Sometimes people call in, and the minute you give them an opportunity, which I'm sure you've experienced as well, they have an opportunity to ask you a question, all of a sudden, whoa, freeze, and I get that. I totally get that. We'll see.
I've called
into
radio
caller.
shows before and panicked.
Oh, of course you have. Welcome to the Life Dash. Hello, caller?
Hi, how are you doing? Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
Do you have a question for Jay?
Hi. Yes, I do. Jay, I have a question. Okay, we know the Bible's views on homosexuality, correct?
Actually, the term homosexuality didn't exist until 48. But I do know the scriptures you're probably referring to.
Okay. Now, my question is, you are an advocate for gay rights. With knowing what the Bible says about same-sex relations, how does that work?
Well, it works with knowing the history. First of all, Leviticus is something that you have to kind of just put away, because Leviticus has a lot of rules and regulations. Convert shellfish or mixed cottons and fibers, people being put to death for the strangest things. I think none of us want that. Sodom and Gomorrah, people talk about that as well. And Sodom and Gomorrah was destroyed because because how it treated visitors, how it treated strangers who came through town. It killed people. The story that we hear so often is more about rape. And it's more scandalous to me that a guy sends out his daughters to be raped than these people wanting to have sex with angels. So, of course, that doesn't have anything to do with homosexuality as we understand it today. Now, Romans 1 is the big one. But what you got to realize is the law of Rome at the time is that men were not legally allowed to have sex with other men. You could have sex with unmen. Now, unmen, which is an odd word, would be slaves or temple prostitutes or boys under 13. And you could not be penetrated, only you could be the penetrator. Now, so that was illegal. Now, when Paul is talking about birds, the type of animals that look like birds and stuff, he's talking about a particular god that was a fertility god that allowed, part of worshiping that god was for people to have sex with people of the same gender, with pieces of wood, to bake muffins and cakes and stuff that looked like genitalia. So what you have is very particular situations. We're not talking about two people in a loving relationship. We're not talking about two people who care about one another. What we're talking about is idol worship, or we're talking about rape, or incest even. So these are the things that, temple prostitution, these are the things that the Bible is dealing with. And we like to see the Bible through a lens. We have our American idea of our lens. Sometimes we have such a lens that we read the gospel or we read the whole Bible through either like an Old Testament lens or even Paul's lens. When I think it's important for us to read the Bible through a Jesus lens rather than even a contemporary lens. It's funny, I went camping this weekend, and I was thinking about how crazy it was being out there camping, because I'm not a camper, not a big camper. and living out there on the land and doing all this stuff, and how completely different it was, and thinking, if this is just so different to me, and I still had my iPhone with me and all this stuff, and I was thinking about Middle Eastern culture 2,000 years ago, and the church does not grasp or have a good knowledge on Middle Eastern culture 2,000 years ago. If we were to drop most people into the Middle East now, they wouldn't have a great concept and idea of the culture. So what we have to do is we have to learn to read the Bible in context. Now, this is the strange part. For me, why I came to the point where I was as gay affirming is because at the time I was kind of a literalist. I grew up where there could be nothing wrong with the Bible. Nothing could contradict one another, anything like that. So I started to study those verses to see if they were there and what was there. And what I realized was it was talking about idol worship. It was talking about in the Old Testament, it's especially talking about spilling of seed, because it's a small group of Jews together trying to continue to grow a community. So even masturbation would have been considered, for a male, would have been considered a waste of seed. In Romans 1, when it says life force, at that time they believed that semen actually had some sort of life force, and the due penalty was when you lost that, part of your life was gone. So when you start to understand that it's a lot more complicated than we've been told, oh, just read it black and white, and there it is. It's just the book is it's great that we want to read the Bible, but we should know that we're not going to understand it just for face value. I would say that most folks have a sixth grade understanding of the Bible, and I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing. What I'm trying to say is that that's just the reality of the culture we live in. And a lot of people aren't afraid to get into the Word. And, two, a lot of folks who understand this and agree with certain, like these verses, I've met pastors who agree with me, but they don't say anything because they're afraid of the congregants. They're afraid of what the people are going to say. Everybody's got their mind made up. So if I come out and say, well, there's really nothing in the Bible about this. Like I met with one pastor, and he said, Jay, I know none of those verses are about homosexuality. And my one thing is that God told man to leave his family and woman to leave this family, and together they come one. He goes, that's the verse, And that's rarely a verse you usually hear to argue. You always hear about Romans and Timothy's and Leviticus and all these other verses. I know this is such a long-winded answer. I apologize for that.
No, but you know what, though? It's a very important one, because I think, and I know that you as a pastor get this asked of you often, and I know that you've shared that you've even lost supporters because of your stance. But real quick, because I have another caller that has come in, and I want to make sure that they have an opportunity to speak to you.
Yeah, I'll keep my
Welcome to the
brief.
Life Dash. This is Michelle and Jay.
Hey guys, this is Dwayne. Jay, I've grown up with you, your whole life and your family. I was raised Pentecostal. And I really have dealt with the issues that you're talking about today, with how to understand the Bible, how to deal with being gay, but being taught that it was wrong all your life. And I know that you've just talked about the same subject, so that he kind of took my question. But I just want to tell you how much your ministry has meant to me, and just the style. You're laid back. I know that your church meets in a bar, and it's very laid back. You accept anyone in your church. And but still this day, as a music director, and that's what my training is, I can't work in the churches that I love the music for, because they don't accept gays. And so I'm having to, change my musical style to adapt to society, which is kind of irritating. Where do you think the church is right now with the whole gay issue, and especially with the Supreme Court decision that just happened?
Well, I mean, I think the church is growing. I mean, I think of the ELCA, which is the Evangelical Lutherans. I think the A's Association, I can't remember. But, one of the biggest collection of Lutherans in this country who are now all gay affirming. Some of these more mainline denominations are becoming more and more gay affirming. Unfortunately, for a lot of us who grew up in the Pentecostal church, even as evangelicals, those churches aren't changing as fast. But we just recently saw Exodus, the giant evangelical ex-gay ministry, shut its doors and close down and leave an apology, even though they may create something else that's a gentle, kinder version of that. The fact is people are realizing it doesn't work. People are realizing that the fruit of the ex-gay movement is death, is bad marriages, is suicide, is depression. You know, Jesus, you'll know they belong to me by their love for one another. Also, you'll know a tree by its fruit, the fruit that it bears. And so these ministries have left a road of destruction behind them, of hurt people who can't want to worship God, want to praise God, want to come in and lead everybody in the worship to praise God, and the doors have been shut on them. And for me, that doesn't seem Jesus. It seems very church to me, because that's how I've known the church. That is the church in a lot of ways, the building and the organizations, but it's not how Jesus was. You know, Jesus didn't seem to be real particular about who he spent time with. But I think with the recent Supreme Court thing, I think we're going to start to see more churches open and affirming. I'm already seeing pastors who are afraid to say where they stand. And it used to be that they were really quick to say, like, oh, no, we're anti-gay, we're not this. Now they're like, oh, you know, I'll be like, are you gay affirming? And they'll be like, well, I'm people affirming, which is strange because it's like, yeah, I mean, they're
and gay people are people.
Yeah, you know, so they're trying to test the waters and see if it's okay. I mean, I've met with pastors privately who said, you know, we're thinking about this, but we're not sure, and what about the A, B, C, or D? And, you know, and some of it has to do with, you know, heterosexism and such as male-driven society. A lot of times you see, you know, a lot of what you hear is preached against gay men, you know, because for some reason men are intimidated by that, and there's this yicky factor and all this stuff, and so they go after it. And you know, it's sad to me that we continue to be on the wrong side of history. My hope is that that the church will change. My fear is, and kind of my hunch is that we've eventually killed the church. That we're going to see more and more people leaving the church, and we haven't acted fast enough. And because of our exclusion of the LGBTQ community, the church is definitely going to be something that will be a minority. Of course, then, you know, all things are possible through God, so we can see what happens there. But I think people are tired of the hypocrisy. They're tired of seeing the pain. They're tired of seeing the fruit of what the church does and has done. And as a Christian, it breaks my heart. And as someone who has hope and believes in the church, you know, it's tough. But I also have a friend who says, you know, you have to die in order to resurrect. So, you know, who knows?
Jay, we have to take a quick commercial break. But when we come back, we have some more questions for Jay Bakker, who has just come out with his latest book, Faith, Doubt, and Other Lines I've Crossed, Walking with the Unknown God. What others have to say about me is none of my business. My life is meant to astonish. This is your time. Dare to be audacious.
The Life Dash with Michele Mattia.
I've performed over 3,000 cosmetic surgery procedures in just the past few years on celebrities, athletes, and patients in South Florida, Beverly Hills, and Manhattan.
Ever wonder why celebrities have skin that seems to glow and radiate health? Get the treatments the stars receive only at Forever Young Med Spa. This year, lose the fat, keep the curves. Forever Young Med Spa. Relax, rejuvenate, and transform. Winner of the Best Cosmetic Surgical Center 3 years in a row.
Hi, I'm Brian Sodella, owner of Forever Young Med Spa, and I personally invite you to visit our location in Cooper City at 8723 Sterling Road at the intersection of Pine Island and Sterling. Our phone number is 954-450-2626.
The National Institute of Mental Health reports that 1 in 4 adults will experience a mental health disorder in a given year. By 2020, major depressive illness will be the leading cause of disability in the world for women and children. I'm Marjorie McGinn, President and Executive Director of Women in Government. I urge you to talk to your healthcare provider about early identification and treatment. Without treatment, the consequences for the individual and society are staggering. Disability, unemployment, substance abuse, homelessness, inappropriate incarceration, and wasted lives. Untreated mental illness in the U.S. results in an average cost of $100 billion annually. Common treatments for serious mental illnesses are highly effective. Between 70 and 90% of individuals have significant symptom relief and improved quality of life. Please visit womeningovernment.org.
Michele Mattia, dare to be audacious.
Welcome back to the Life's Dash with Michele Mattia and my very special guest, Jay Bakker. Jay, in your book, you talk about this UK comic book, Knight and the Squire, which I now have to read. I have a son, so it's like, he's 19 months old, can't read yet, but this comic book sounded so extraordinary. And I have to say, I was inspired by that pub called the Time in a Bottle, which you described. It's this place where villains and heroes, people that hate each other, don't like each other, because there's some sort of spell, they are able to come together and sit and have a conversation. And I, as someone who appreciates the power of the spoken word and how we can radiate love, even if we don't disagree, how do you think we can create something like this pub that currently only exists in a comic book?
Well, it's funny, the reason Revolution meets in a bar is we didn't do it to be edgy or crazy or anything like that. We'd actually been meeting in a coffee shop, and we had lost the space. And a bar had found out about us, and the bar had found out, knew about us in the community, and knew who we were, and knew that we weren't, street preachers or anything like that, and they welcomed us in. And it was shocking to me the first time I did church and someone opened up like a tall boy of Pabst Blue Ribbon. But what I realized is that there was a neutral ground and there's a neutral territory. And that was the start of it. But that was a service. I mean, for me, a safe space is sharing a meal with people, going out and having dinner with people. The Bible talks about love never demands its own way. It's not irritable and keeps no record of when it's been wronged. I'm right back at Corinthians 13 again. And those are things that we have to learn. We've got to stop demanding our own way. The church has got, you think you get on fire and you think you're speaking for God, but what you have to remember is there were people on fire and angry about interracial marriage 25, 35 years ago. We've got to get to the point where we're willing to take a deep breath and listen to one another. I'm not a big fan of reading comments. I think that helps. Internet comments.
I agree.
Even some of the it could turn us all into just crazy, wicked people. I think if we were willing to die to ourselves, accept that we're accepted, and willing to be able to discuss our differences, it would be great. If we got over the fact that we had to be right. This is where it gets into the point where you're saying it's none of your business what anybody thinks about you, not just what anybody says about you, but also what they think about you. And you have a conversation and maybe you see a disapproving thing, or maybe they say something and where you say that it's none of your business what someone says about you. That's how you just don't take it personal. It's hard not to take it personally. You think you have to defend God, but God is God, and God is infinite, and you're finite, and you can't defend God, and you can't save God, so just get over it and move on. And you don't know it all, and they don't know it all, and so we get together and we share things, and we wrestle over the truth and hopes for the future, and have these type of conversations. So honestly, I don't know if it's possible to ever have. It was Merlin the magician who cast a spell on, I believe it was Merlin, who cast a spell on that bar. And it's funny because, in the bar they do give each other hard times, but by like razzing one another or playing tricks on one another, and they almost start to get to the point where they, kind of have a fondness for each other. And you see these criminals go out, and none of them are quite as bad as the criminals back in the States. Like none of them, like there's kind of a Joker, but he's not really the Joker, not as bad as the Joker. There's all these guys who are like, their counterparts in the United States are really evil and horrible, but it's almost as though the best thing that ever happened to them was a place of the community, for the whole community to come together. Now, this is where I'll say this is what I think is important, is realizing that community is not your church. It's not your body of your church that you go to. That is not the community. Your church is merely placed in a community. The gas station is part of the community. The hairstylist, the barber shop, that's part of the community. The local shops, the gas, the bidet on the corner, that's part of the community. And when we, in the restaurants and the bars, and when we learn to live in community with one another and build relationships in actual community, because if you just sit in the church and you love everybody that agrees with you and you talk about the same things and do all that, I mean, the Bible talks about what good is that if you only love those who love you. What is that different than anything else?
Right.
We're called to love those who don't love us or love those who are outside of our thing. So learn to, be patient and kind. There's a reason that those are fruits of the Spirit. There's a reason never giving up is a fruit of the Spirit. It's tough, and when you have to pick up your cross or die to yourself daily, a lot of times it's dying to being right, dying to your own, need to be correct, and your own pride, and that's such a tough thing. I think it's possible, but I think it's tough. And the problem is in the church today is if someone doesn't agree with you in the church, they stop going, or they stop giving money,
right,
or they cut all ties. Now, you're never going to build community if that's how you work and disagree with people.
And as I shared, right before the break too, you are so authentic and you are so open with your beliefs and your support, and in doing so, you did lose supporters. And I just received an email. We have now it's so funny. You talk about, you were in a coffee shop and then you moved to a bar. Everyone who knows me knows that if you can't find me, check out the local Starbucks and you will find me. And it's frightening how they usually have my drink ready as I'm walking in. But there is an actual, in Florida right now, there is a large group of people in a Starbucks listening to the show. And I just got an email from Patricia. Patricia from Starbucks asks. She is a Christian, and she wants to know what sort of guidance you have on the best way to come out to a family that you are gay, knowing that you are a Christian and you were raised in this traditional Christian religion upbringing that you and I have been talking about today.
Well, I'll tell you what. First of all, I would find someone that you know who's been out a long time and sit down and have a conversation with them. I'm a heterosexual white male, so I'm probably not the best person to ask. But I can give you one bit of advice, is that to remember that you've had your whole life to prepare for this. And your family might not be on their radar. And they haven't had time to prepare. So I think that's a good thing to keep in mind. But I also think it's good to surround yourself with people you love, and I don't think you have to do it alone. But my best thing would be is talk to your friends about it. Talk to other people who you know have come out, and hope for the best and prepare for the worst, and have a community built around you, ready for either way, either to throw a party or to console you no matter what happens. That would be my 2 cents. But most of all is find people in the community who've been there and done it and can speak from experience. My hope is that, I recently we had our first service on Mother's Day, and we had a young man come to church, and right that same weekend we had gay marriage got made legal here in Minnesota, and the young man had taken his mom to the church, and the pastor started to speak against it being, you know, against gay marriage and against LGBTQ folks. You know, and he got up, the son got up and walked out of the church and started crying. And his mom got up and followed him and sat with him. And his mom just said, well, you know, we're gonna find another church. Don't worry, honey. We love you. We're gonna go through this. You know, and now unfortunately that's the exception to usually what I hear coming from the Christian church. But the fact is things are changing. I've heard of people, you know, baking cakes for their kids when they came out, but I've also heard of people saying, you know, you're dead to me and get out of here. To me, that's sad because that's something that the church has taught people, not the Bible, but tradition has taught people. And there's not love or grace in that. People might quote, you know, well, the Bible says turn them over to Satan, blah, 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 but what they're not taking into consideration is what community looked like in the Middle East 2,000 years ago and what the world looks like now. If you kick someone out of a community, it's likelihood that they would be killed in the next community or starve before they got to the next community, you know. So restoration was something that was positively going to happen. But, you know, surround yourself with people you love. You know, that's my thing, is surround yourself with people you love, prepare yourself, go through it, practice the conversation. And if you're in Minneapolis, you know, and you need somebody to pray for you or sit with you or even go with you, you know, come on down to Revolution. I'd be glad to help any way I can.
Now, I want to share that, make sure that we highlight that. You have recently relocated to Minneapolis, where you opened the Revolution Church there. But we still have the Revolution Church here in Brooklyn, correct?
Yes. It's going on, pastored by Reverend Vince Anderson, who's an amazing man and an amazing musician. He plays every Monday night at Union Pool around 11 o'clock, and if you want to get your mind blown, he plays something called Dirty Gospel, and you have to see it to believe it. So yeah, we're still there. We're at Pete's Candy Store. Vince is at Pete's Candy Store. And I'm here. We meet at a place called Bryant Lake Bowl. And if you just go to revolutionchurch.com, you can kind of get the information about us all. And we have, you know, Revolution Minnesota. I believe it's Revolution MINN on Twitter, and we update you there. You can go to Revolution NYC on Twitter and get updates there. We're trying to kind of streamline everything right now, so we're in a big change process. But all of our sermons are free at revolutionchurch.com.
And I think what's wonderful too, and you know, as many people often feel, they have like a love-hate relationship with technology. And I think that what is extraordinary is a church like yours, that even if the person is not close enough to attend in person, that there's ways that they can still access and hear and be a part of a community. Because I agree with you. You know, community isn't always the physical location of where your butt is and where your feet are, and you can have community and experience community all over.
It's amazing. We have more people attend Revolution online. Honestly, if it wasn't for the online listeners, we would not exist. And to me, that's mind-blowing, because for me, it was a friend of mine saying, let's put everything online. I was like, oh, okay, whatever, you know. And there's a whole community online, and right now we continue to work on our website to make it more friendly and trying to get people connected with one another. But, I mean, it's, you know, it's a different world we live in than it was just 10, 15. I mean, I'm almost been doing this for 20 years, so.
Wow.
And things have
you know
changed quite a bit.
And Starbucks is continuing to email me, and this is actually very interesting because, and this is Phil. Phil wants to know, and I don't necessarily know that you experience this now being a pastor and founder of the Revolution Church, but you might. He wonders how the church feels about your quote-unquote non-traditional look, which you do have a non-traditional look. I am sure people who don't know or recognize you, when you share that you're a pastor, they might cock their head a little because of the tattoos and piercing.
Yeah, well, I don't have any more piercings. I took those all out just because I'm losing my hair, and I started to be that guy. Nothing against bald people with piercings. More power to you. My insecurity wouldn't let me. But I do have a lot of tattoos, and I continue to get tattoos, and I love tattoos. yeah, it is funny. You know, when someone goes, "So, what do you do?" You know, and you're just kind of like, "Oh, it's sometimes it's painful because you know, yeah, I'm a pastor." You know, and not even a shock, but just the fact that you're saying you're a pastor, and people are going like, "Oh, you know what?" And then they're like, "What kind of pastor?" And they're like, "I'm a Christian pastor." And they're like, "Oh," and then I always have to be like, "Yes, but we're very open and loving and caring," because you know when people hear Christian and a pastor, it doesn't matter that I have tattoos. They automatically assume that I'm think a particular way, vote a particular way, and believe a particular way. Usually I start out with now saying, well, I'm a writer, and I write, and I also run a church and a bar and slash bowling alley in Minneapolis. And then that makes it a little, that lightens the shock a little bit. Now, when I was younger, I mean, people, you know, ask, you know, what I used to have fun with it when I was younger. People were like, what do you do? And I'm like, what do you think I do? You know, do like work at a tattoo parlor. You know, I get asked all the time here in Minneapolis if I work at a tattoo parlor, and I'm like, no, I don't. I just get them. You know, so yeah, it's a little bit strange. You know, it is what it is, I guess.
You know, it's true. I mean, I have 4 tattoos, and I got my first one when I was 37. And I remember my family's in Florida, and I remember walking to, because I knew that this was the tattoo that I was meant to have, and it was when I went to Ireland, and I found out where my mom's side of the family, where my ancestors came from, and it was this symbol, and it's a Celtic knot. And my dad called, and as I'm walking, he's like, "I forbid you from getting a tattoo." And I'm like, "Oh, Dad, I'm 37." But it was this really cute and sweet moment. But what's so interesting is that people who meet me, I get, "Oh, you don't have the face for tattoos." And I'm like, well, it's good because I didn't put the tattoo on my face. And,
yeah.
you know, but then, you know, what's interesting too is when I always get picked for juries. And at the end of the juries, I've been on so many, and every single time I've had both the defense, both sides come up to me saying, we didn't know how to figure you out because you have a tattoo, but you don't have the face for it. And I'm like, okay, you know, but exactly, and it's like, I don't have the face for tattoos, which I guess is okay. But, you know, that makes me think about that, you know, another quote from your book, which, and I leave it at that, is we are all living by faith. We are all living under grace. The only difference between you and me and the scandalous outsider is nothing more than the labels we use to separate us from them. And I don't know about you, Jay, but when I introduce my friends, whether they're gay, straight, black, white, I don't say, and this is my godson's gay, and this is my son's gay godfather who is white and Italian. I don't introduce people like that. And it only seems to be in certain circumstances, and it usually is around gay, straight, like, oh, you didn't say that they were gay. I am, you know, and it's like, well, and I also didn't say that they're lactose intolerant. Where, you know, are you also seeing, hopefully, in New York City it's very, very different. I mean, you were here. There's a lot of diversity here. Being in Minneapolis, are you seeing people shying away from the labels? Or
the labels are a little bit more, are here a little bit more. You know, when you're in New York, you're in a bubble. And, I mean, I knew I was in a bubble, but I didn't realize how much of a bubble it was. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I mean, Minneapolis is a very progressive place, which is, you know, I hear people talking about theology and atheism next to me at the you know, atheists and theologians having discussions next to me at the coffee shop here. Which I think is kind of a really amazing, beautiful thing. But, you know, there still are labels, you know, and there's still people have agendas, and people are still scared. I mean, you know, you have, you know, one of the bigger, more conservative neo-Calvinist churches here in Minneapolis. So, you know, you do have some issues, and it's tough to go back. I mean, it's strange. You know, there are still the labels, and it's just sad. I wish there wasn't. I'm glad that I live in a state that it's legal for LGBTQ folks to get married. Me and my wife, we got married right before he moved here because we wanted to be married in a state where it was legal, and so we got married in New York.
Yay!
Yeah. And then we came here, and it became legal again. It became legal. So, and like my friend Tony Jones, who's a pastor, him and his wife, they're married, but they're not married by the state. They're just married by the church, and they now are going to get married by the state here in the next few months because it's legal now. It's kind of the opposite of what I did with me and Karen did. We got married by we went to the courthouse and got married. And now they got married at the church. Now they're going to the courthouse, so maybe one day me and Karen will go to the church. Who knows?
Now, I have to share, Frances, who's 78, she wants to ask if you remember as a young man at being on stage in a tux with sneakers on.
Yes, I do. It was New Year's Eve, I believe New Year's Eve 2000, New Year's Eve 1987, I believe it was. And they were, it was a white Miami Vice tuxedo. Literally, there was a Miami Vice tuxedo. Yeah, and they were blue Converse with, black Converse with blue skulls all over them. And I remember my dad was kind of a little worried about the skulls.
But there you were up on stage. I think that's amazing. Now I've got that visualization.
I was introducing my mom and dad. And I was kind of chubby. And my pants were pulled up really high so you could see my shoes. And my dad's like, "Who's your tailor?" I don't know why I remember that, but
Oh, that's actually a fun memory. And I just want to make sure I share this with you. I just got an email from Jeff Dreyer who says, "Please tell Jay thank you from a 42-year-old gay Christian man who has struggled for 20 years with his sexuality and spirituality. Through your work and another man named Rob Bell, these two are coexisting with peace finally." And he said he would have called in, but he's been crying as he's been listening to our show because it's so healing. So I wanted to make sure. I think it's important that you know and that you hear how you are making a difference. And I know because I read your book, and you even shared about it a little bit. We go in, we follow our heart, we follow that divine path, whatever it is for us, and we're loving it, and we know that this is ours to do, but then sometimes we can beat up a little and get criticized. And I know that you often don't read comments, but I know that there's been moments in your life where you're like, shoot, should I be doing this? And I just want to share with you that I'm glad you are. And
thank you.
Jeff clearly is that you are. And I do hope that the next time you and your family are visiting New York City that you please let me know, because I am so grateful for what you are doing, and I would love to have you back on the show. And everyone, Jay's website is jaybakker.com. There's information there about his books. And Jay, can you share with any of us, are you speaking anywhere outside of Minneapolis in the next few weeks, few months?
Well, my speaking calendar isn't like what it used to be, so I don't think I have anything coming up right away. I'm actually going out of the country. My wife is Swiss, so her parents are having us up in Switzerland. So if you're in Switzerland, say hi. No, I will be continuing to do Revolution here every Sunday at 4. I will be up in New York in November, I believe, because my wife is running in the New York Marathon, so I'm pretty excited about that. But if someone is interested in booking me or having me out, you can do that through jaybakker.com as well. All that good stuff. And I am working right now on starting a new video blog, so that should be out in the next month or two.
And I meant to ask you before, because I know that you have a sister, Tammy Sue. Do both of you? Do you both ever do a ministry together? Have you ever done anything on stage as far as preaching or a shared ministry?
We haven't. I mean, me and my sister are like best friends and really close, and feel like we've been through hell and back together. Actually, she sang at an event I was at in Little Rock, Arkansas, which I will be back in September, actually. I don't have the date off the top of my head, but Open Door Community Church. She sang there last year, and I spoke, and I'm hoping that she's going to be there this year and singing, and I'll be speaking again. So, yeah, my sister's an amazing person, and I wish more people knew about her, and I hope people will, seek her out. She works with my dad right now, and she's just an amazing musician and just an amazing person.
Well, you've just let the world know about her now, and and because we knew that this radio show would get listeners, and we knew that the right and perfect audience would show up here. My producers have this show, our interview. It's going to be airing again on Sunday. So,
awesome.
Yeah, and it's also been
retweet it.
please, and it's also, and just so you know, because you're so wonderful and amazing, and it's also been featured. So it's been featured on the Blog Talk Radio Network, and which to me, and that just to me screams volume that change is happening, and that we realize that more and more people, that your message needs to get out there. So, Jay, thank you so much for being a guest on this show and for spending so much time and answering questions, and I can't wait to have you back.
Thank you so much for having me.
Have a great weekend. Enjoy Switzerland.
I will. I'm very excited about it.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.
There is not enough time in the day to have a conversation with Jay Bakker, and I just might have to. I've never been to Minneapolis, so it might be time. I can just, hop on a plane, bring my family, and attend one of their services at Revolution Church. This has been an extraordinary time on the Life Stash. I am so grateful. We've come to the end of the show. Thank you again to Jay Bakker. Thank you to my producers, Brushwood Media Group, who put this all together. And thank you to the callers and to the listeners and those of you who shared your memories and your questions with Jay today. And a shout-out of love and gratitude to the Handsomes 1 and 2, my husband Jim and son Grayson, who are the best part of my dynamic and delicious life. The Life Stash with Michele Mattia, Dare to be Audacious, airs live every Monday through Friday, 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. To learn more about me and stay connected, visit my website, which is michelemattia.com. You'll find information about me, links to my social media networks, and information about the show. Be good to one another. Be good to yourself. And dare to be audacious.